$344.7 billion. 1 year, one country, private capital, deployed. $344.7 billion in a single year, up 127.5% from 2024. According to the Stanford HAI AI Index, published April 2026, U.S. private AI investment was 23 times greater than China's $12.4 billion. Not double, not triple, 23 times. The narrative says the AI race is close. The data says something different. You have been told China is catching up. You have been told DeepSeek changed everything. You have been told the gap is closing. The investment numbers do not support any of that. If you want to see the real numbers behind the headlines, subscribe to the Data Desk and hit the bell so you never miss a breakdown. Global corporate AI investment hit $581.7 billion in 2025, up 130% in 1 year, more than double the prior record. The United States drove more than half of it. Every dollar China invested in AI last year, America invested 23. That is not a race. That is a different category. But investment is only part of the story. Infrastructure does, compute does, talent does. And when you look at each pillar, the same pattern holds. America is not ahead by a margin. It is ahead by a structure. Worldwide AI spending is forecast to reach $2.52 trillion in 2026, per Gartner. American companies are building the backbone the entire world will run on. 4 American companies, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, are projected to spend between $635 and $665 billion in capital expenditure in 2026 alone. 4 corporations, 1 technology category. That combined figure exceeds the GDP of most nations on Earth. Microsoft has committed $600 billion to AI infrastructure. Meta guided $48 billion in AI CapEx. Amazon's 2026 CapEx is up sharply from $131 billion in 2025. Google's data center expansion is accelerating every quarter. This is not a government program. This is the private sector at a speed no state-directed economy can match. China's entire private AI investment in 2025 was $12.4 billion. 1 American company's single commitment dwarfs that by 50. Worker access to AI in U.S. enterprises rose 50% in 2025 per Deloitte's 2026 State of AI report. 42% of companies named optimizing AI workflows their top spending priority this year. The deployment curve is not slowing. It is compounding. $285.9 billion for the United States, $12.4 billion for China. The gap is not a margin. It is a structural reality. This is the verified investment landscape of the AI race in 2025. So if the gap is 23-1, why does the mainstream narrative keep saying the race is tight? Why does every DeepSeek headline land like a warning shot? What does the data show when you go beyond the investment line and look at who is building the models, who is deploying them, and who is turning AI into measurable economic output? That breakdown is next. The foundation is not a head start. It is a compounding advantage built on capital, compute, talent, and deployment speed that no competitor has matched in any single year. The investment gap is 23-1. But critics have one counter-argument. They point to DeepSeek. They say China is closing the gap where it actually matters, in the models themselves. The data is more complicated than that headline suggests, and it is worth running carefully. In 2024, U.S. institutions produced 40 notable AI models. China produced 15. The EU produced 8. America produced more than China and Europe combined. That lead held across every category of model evaluated in the index. On raw benchmark performance, the US still leads. Per Stanford HAI, published April 2026, the top US model leads China's best by 2.7% as of March 2026. DeepSeek R1 briefly matched the top US model in February 2025. The gap fluctuated for several months. As of the latest verified data, America still holds the top spot. That 2.7% margin is narrow. Critics are right to flag it. The performance gap has compressed over the past 18 months. But benchmark score is one dimension of the race. Deployment scale, infrastructure depth, and compute access are three others. On all three, the comparison is not close. SWE-Bench tells the real capability story. Top AI models scored 60% in 2024. By 2025, US models reached near 100%. 1 year, 40 percentage points. That is not incremental. That is a structural step change in capability. US organizational AI adoption reached 88% in 2025, per Stanford HAI. Nearly 9 in 10 measured organizations are deploying AI in production environments. Not pilots, not trials. Operational integration at scale across the American economy. That deployment depth is what converts investment into output, and it is a lead that cannot be replicated overnight. Goldman Sachs, in a March 2026 report, found that teams measuring AI-driven productivity gains on specific tasks recorded a median improvement of 30%. On defined workflows, the gains are real. Goldman also noted AI contributed close to zero to overall US GDP in 2025. But Goldman's own research projects that shifts materially by 2027. The infrastructure built today is the foundation for that wave. NVIDIA controls 92% of the discrete GPU market in 2025. One American company supplies the hardware layer of the entire global AI build-out. Every data center in China, Europe, the Gulf depends on American silicon to operate at frontier scale. That compute dominance compounds every other advantage. US chip export controls, tightened repeatedly through 2025, have directly limited China's ability to train frontier models at scale. Beijing can allocate capital. It cannot easily procure the chips that convert that capital into capability. That constraint does not disappear with a government directive or a policy announcement. 92% GPU market share, $215.9 billion in 2025 revenue, $358.7 billion forecast for 2026. One American company controls the compute layer of the global AI race. The entire world builds on it, whether it wants to or not. China is ramping R&D at 9.7% annually. It is deploying state capital at a scale private figures do not fully capture. But state-directed and private capital are not equivalent. One optimizes for political control. The other optimizes for deployment speed. In a technology race, deployment speed determines who writes the standard the world adopts. Right now, that standard is American. But one data set carries a warning the investment numbers do not show. The talent pipeline. That is the story in part 3. The investment numbers favor America by a ratio of 23-1. The compute layer is American. The model output is American. The deployment rate is American. But the Stanford HAI Index 2026 contains one data point that cuts through all of that. And it is not about China. It is about America's own pipeline. The number of AI researchers and developers moving to the United States has dropped 89% since 2017. 89%. And the decline is accelerating. Per Stanford HAI, the drop was 80% in the last year alone. America is producing the models, building the infrastructure, and leading the investment race, while simultaneously losing its pull on the global talent that fuels the next generation of that lead. 89% decline since 2017, 80% in the last year alone. The talent pipeline into the United States is contracting. At the same moment, the investment pipeline is expanding at record pace. That tension matters, because AI leadership is not just a function of capital. It is a function of the researchers who train the next frontier model, architect the next data center, and found the next generation of AI companies. If the capital is here, but the talent increasingly is not, the structural advantage begins to erode in ways the investment numbers alone do not show. America still leads in AI entrepreneurship. 1,953 newly funded AI companies in 2025, more than 10 times the next closest country, per Stanford HAI. The startup engine is running. The question is how long it runs without the talent inflow that fed it. The policy response is already underway. The Stargate initiative, announced January 2025, committed $500 billion in public-private AI infrastructure investment. The first data center opened in Abilene, Texas, in September 2025. 5 additional sites are operational or under construction. The pipeline reached $400 billion in committed investment by late 2025, ahead of the original schedule. The White House AI Action Plan, signed July 2025, directed federal agencies to accelerate AI deployment and established a framework for maintaining U.S. leadership across every layer of the stack: compute, models, data, and talent. The policy architecture exists. The capital is committed. The infrastructure is being built. The Stargate first site in Abilene is operational. $500 billion committed. 6 sites underway. America is not just investing in AI leadership, it is physically constructing the infrastructure that makes that leadership permanent. The talent warning is real, but context matters. America still funded 1,953 new AI companies in 2025, more than 10 times any other nation. The AI skills cluster, labeled Agentic AI, appeared in job postings at 280% growth in 1 year, per Lightcast and Stanford HAI. AI skills now appear in 2.5% of all U.S. job postings. The workforce is reorienting toward AI, even as the inbound researcher pipeline contracts. 1,953 newly funded AI companies, 10 times the next closest country. Agentic AI job postings up 280% in a single year. The entrepreneurial engine is not slowing, it is compounding. The talent pipeline decline is the one number in the Stanford report that demands a policy response, and it is getting one. But the question of whether that response arrives fast enough is the open loop the data leaves behind, because the adversary is not waiting. And what China is doing with its own AI investment, not in the private sector, but at the state level, is the story that closes this breakdown. Here is what the full picture shows. America leads in investment 23-1. It leads in model output, compute control, deployment scale, and entrepreneurial activity. The talent pipeline is contracting. That is a real warning. But the structural foundation is not cracking. It is being reinforced at every layer. China is not standing still. Beijing's 5-year plan, released March 2026, calls for AI across the entire economy. Quantum computing, 6G, embodied AI, military systems. Defense spending rose 6.9% in 2026, with AI and autonomy as stated priorities. The Pentagon's December 2025 China report confirmed AI investment in surveillance, logistics, and autonomous systems at scale. This is a dual-use competition. $285.9 billion versus $12.4 billion. 1,953 new U.S. AI companies. America leads every civilian metric. China is placing targeted military AI bets to close the gap selectively. That asymmetry defines the real competition. America is building a broad AI economy. China is targeting military applications where export controls bite less. Defense News reported in April 2026 that China may have surpassed the US in AI for drone swarms. One domain, not the race, but a number serious analysts note. In 2026, the US transformed AI chips into a primary instrument of strategic containment per Tech Policy Law, February 2026. Case-by-case licensing, record enforcement penalties in Q1 2026. The chip is now a foreign policy tool. New rules under consideration as of March 2026, per Reuters, would require foreign governments receiving US AI chips to make reciprocal investment commitments. The export regime is evolving from a denial tool into a leverage tool, converting hardware dominance into binding allied commitments on American terms. The 92% GPU share NVIDIA holds is not just a revenue line. It is a geopolitical instrument tying allied AI development to American technology standards and American supply chains. The chips, the models, the safety frameworks, the regulatory architecture, all being written in American labs and policy offices. That is what 23-to-1 means in practice. Here is the verdict. $285.9 billion invested, 23 times China. 1,953 new AI companies, 10 times any other nation. NVIDIA at 92% of global GPU supply. Stargate operational. SWE-Bench from 60% to near 100% in 1 year. Adoption at 88%. The talent pipeline needs action. China's military AI bets demand vigilance. But the structural picture points one way. $49 billion in 2019, $109 billion in 2024, $285.9 billion in 2025. Not a spike, a compounding climb no adversary has matched in any single year of this race. America is not winning because of one company or one model. It is winning because the entire stack, hardware, capital, infrastructure, and allied leverage compounds in the same direction at the same time. The data does not require a narrator. It simply states what is true. Read the data. See the world differently. What story should we break down next? Drop it in the comments, and we will see you in the next data file.